Disney calls this their most lifelike animatronic ever, Walt Disney himself. But Walt might also be their most controversial animatronic ever. 30 years ago, Imagineering's most legendary sculptor warned against making a Walt animatronic, saying it shouldn't be done. But now that it has been done, reactions range from amazed to creeped out to downright vicious. Why are people reacting this way? How could an animatronic that's so technically amazing be so divisive? And why does his face look like that? Everyone's got a hot take, and honestly, my hot take is that everyone is wrong about the Walt animatronic. Hi, I'm James from Guide to WDW, and in this video I'm going to unpack Disney's crazy ambitious Walt Disney Animatronic, the technical innovations, the shortcomings that are causing a backlash, and what everyone is getting wrong about the Walt animatronic. Plus, I'll get into how all this ties back into Disney's first animatronic based on a real human, Abraham Lincoln. Walt the Animatronic is part of a new show at Disneyland, Walt Disney A Magical Life, which debuted 70 years to the day after Walt the Man opened Disneyland to the public.
You know, I was stumped one day when the little boy asked, "Do you draw Mickey Mouse?" And I had to admit I do not draw anymore. Well, then you think up all the jokes and ideas. No, I said, I don't do that. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Mr. Disney, just what do you do?"
This animatronic is a huge deal. It required years of work, many technological breakthroughs to bring to life, while taking on the complex task of portraying Walt Disney in a lifelike way. Imagineers have called this their moonshot, saying that they wanted to give guests the experience of feeling like they're actually in the same room as Walt. For a bit of context, I love animatronics. They are probably my single favorite aspect of theme parks. The catchphrase in my Future World series is "everything's better with animatronics." And we are currently in an animatronic renaissance. Other than allegedly putting Donald Trump's face onto Hillary Clinton's robot skull, Disney has been absolutely crushing it with animatronics over the last 10 years, especially with their new A1000 series figures. They are so fluid and expressive. And Universal has also been upping their game with amazing monsters and fantastic beasts. Their animated figures are top-notch. This has been an amazing time to be an animatronic fan. I feel like every time a new major animatronic has debuted over the past few years, fans have been pumped. The sentiment has been overwhelmingly positive, mainly saying, "Wow, these look great, this is unbelievable, look at how far technology has come." But then there's the Walt animatronic, which is an amazing animatronic, and yet people have not had the same reaction, to say the least. I'm just one creator, but I've literally gotten thousands of comments about the Walt animatronic, and a lot of them are brutal, calling him Alt Disney, accusing this of being AI generated, and harshest of all, saying that it looks like the My Pillow guy. There are already major articles about the backlash. And I think it goes deeper than just it doesn't look enough like Walt. But let's start by looking at all the ways the Walt animatronic is a technical marvel. Disney and Imagineering are leaning into how innovative this animatronic is. They call this their most lifelike animatronic ever and their moonshot, requiring 7 years of work and several technological breakthroughs to bring to life. I don't think that this is just Disney talking a big game. This is an incredible feat of animatronics. I think this is their most technically impressive AA figure since the Shaman of Song at Navi River Journey. Walt's face is very expressive, and there are a lot of subtle, nuanced details. The way his brow furrows and relaxes, the soft eyelids, the small moments in between words.
I guess that's the job I do.
Disney talks about how they studied not only Walt's mannerisms, but also the muscle structure of the human face to achieve this level of animation. And where this animatronic really shines is in all those small, subtle movements. It's nothing short of jaw-dropping. The skin is made up of a new material and has a level of natural translucency that looks much more realistic than the skin used on other figures, like the new Trump figure that just debuted. It is also the first lean-to-stand electric figure, which is an amazing moment, and it's very reminiscent of Lincoln standing from his chair or Ben Franklin walking in An American Adventure. But with this being a much newer figure, the motion is much more natural. If you're liking this animatronic deep dive so far, hit subscribe so you don't miss my future videos on the future of Disney parks. So, on a technical level, the motion, the animation, the skin, it's all a huge leap forward for animatronics. So why are people calling this Temu Walt? I think that there's no debate that it's innovative and an amazing technical achievement, yet there is a debate whether or not it's good. I've seen some people taking issue with Disney describing this animatronic as lifelike, but I personally think that lifelike is a good word. It's the most realistic human animatronic I've ever seen. But is it accurate? There are two main things tripping people up, the face and the voice, and yes, those are major things. But I believe they are the result of creative trade-offs. The question here is, are they the right trade-offs? Let's start with the face, because anyone can see that this looks like Walt, but it doesn't really look like Walt. Let's look at this side by side. The animatronic's face is too wide. This is depicting Walt in 1963, but even later in life, Walt's face was taller and more angular. The animatronic Walt looks bloated in comparison, and his neck looks shorter. It all just makes him look more stout than he actually was. I don't think it's way off like some people are saying. As Tom Bricker from Disney Tours blog put it, it's 80% of the way there. But I think when people think of a brand new Walt Disney animatronic in 2025, they're expecting it to be 100%. Just like how it looks like Imagineering plucked its other animatronics straight out of the movies and placed them into the attractions. There was an expectation that they would do the same thing with Walt Disney. And Disney leaned into that leading up to the attraction's debut. The concept art showed a photorealistic Walt. They talked extensively about how they studied Walt's mannerisms, tried to find his same hair product, and recreated his outfit down to the exact shoe size. There is attention to detail out the wazoo here. So it isn't just like, oh, they suddenly forgot what Walt looked like. So why doesn't he look exactly like Walt? I think what's happening here is just a creative trade-off. I think they traded accuracy for expressiveness. On a recent episode of the DSNY newscast where Jack toured Imagineering, he talked about how the shaman of song is so expressive, with 42 different facial movements. That's possible because the head is so big on that massive Na'vi alien, while a typical figure with a human-sized head can only support 12 expressions, just because it's smaller. Based off of that and how important Imagineering says it was to get the subtlety of Walt's expressions and mannerisms right, my assumption is that the face is that wide because that's as small as they could make it, while still having a figure that could emote and perform as well. The other option would be to make the head taller so it looks narrower. But that starts a cascade of shifting proportions. If they're using Walt's exact shoe size, the Walt animatronic is probably the same exact height as Walt was, about 5'10". So if you make the head taller, you need to make the body taller as well to make it look correct. With a bigger body, you'd need to make the set bigger and the props bigger as well so he doesn't look like a giant. Basically, if you give a mouse a cookie, you end up with a 7-foot-tall Walt Disney, who would be a monster in the paint, but how would that read on stage? According to the defunct Blaine Animatronic documentary, Imagineers made the Abraham Lincoln figure a few inches taller than the real Lincoln actually was, because our collective perception of Lincoln was that he was a tall, towering figure. So they changed the animatronic to fit the public image. Making Walt taller than he was might have the opposite effect. Having a giant Walt Disney might come off as intimidating and go against Disney's warm Uncle Walt persona. It's easy for some baldy beardo YouTuber to say, oh, they should just fix the face, but I think there's a lot more at play here. The next sticking point people have is the voice, which is the second most prominent criticism I've seen. Basically, I've seen a lot of people say that it doesn't sound like Walt. But it is Walt, literally. This is not a voice actor, this is not AI, this is Walt Disney talking.
Well, I said sometimes I think of myself as a little bee. I go from one area of the studio to another and gather pollen and sort of stimulate everybody. I guess that's the job I do.
The Imagineers use several different historical sources of dialogue Walt Disney actually said. The story of this show is Walt reflecting on his career and telling different anecdotes about himself and the company. So the creative team took different Disney quotes and weaved them together to fit this story. Disney has been very clear about this. This is audio of Walt himself. So why are so many people saying that it doesn't sound like Walt? Once again, I think it's another creative trade-off. The Imagineers took the audio from all these different historical sources and interviews and they cleaned it up, both so it would sound like Walt is speaking in the room and also so that these different clips would match each other. but I think the processing might have taken out too much. There's a rasp, warmth, and bass to Walt's voice, and that's all been smoothed out.
They say a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, but this little fellow here is worth a fortune, because we poured a fortune into creating him.
And I think that's why people are saying it doesn't sound like Walt or that it sounds like AI. We know Walt by hearing him in old scratchy recordings, so the imperfections feel like Walt. TPM Vids posted this video with the original source audio synced up.
Well, I said sometimes I think of myself as a little bee. I go from one area of the studio to another and gather pollen and sort of stimulate everybody. I guess that's the job I do.
Honestly, that feels more like Walt to me because it sounds old and scratchy, which is my only experience hearing Walt throughout my entire life. Now, would it have been better to choose just one audio source, like the Disneyland opening day dedication?
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Maybe that would require less processing, but Imagineering wanted to make a tribute to Walt's career, so having Walt later in life reflect on what he's accomplished is a more fitting way of doing that. And the creative team felt like the best way to tell that story was to weave together multiple different quotes, and doing that required cleaning it up so everything matches. Once again, it's a creative trade-off for the story they want to tell, but I hope they continue to tweak the audio some more, because to my ear it sounds a little overprocessed. But hang on, Disney's made amazing animatronics that look exactly like movie characters. Why couldn't they nail Walt? After all, Elsa looks like Elsa, Tiana looks like Tiana, even the Jack Sparrow animatronics from 2006 look like Johnny Depp. Over at Epic Universe, Frankenstein's monster looks like Frankenstein's monster, and Dracula looks like Dracula. It's 2025, shouldn't we expect Walt to look closer to 100% than 80%? Well, now we get into the giant challenge of portraying a real human in a lifelike way. It's much easier to portray an animated princess or queen, portray a monster, or portray Frankenstein or Dracula. The animated characters and movie monsters are not based on real humans, so if anything looks off, we don't have a visceral negative reaction. Look at Tiana in the movie versus Tiana in the ride. It's not a one-to-one recreation, but both look like Tiana, and people did not have the same negative reaction to that animatronic that they are now having to Walt. It's the uncanny valley effect. The closer you get to a photorealistic portrayal of a human, the creepier we find it when something looks off. Or to put it in 30 Rock terms,
down here we have a CGI stormtrooper or Tom Hanks in the Polar Express. I'm scared! Get me out of there!
Okay, well what about Johnny Depp? He's a real person, and that animatronic does look like him. But Jack Sparrow is a character with a lot of makeup and an iconic costume. People can put on eyeliner and a pirate outfit and go as Jack Sparrow for Halloween because he's a stylized character. Walt is just a guy in a suit. The animatronic is a good likeness of Johnny Depp, but the costume also does a lot of the heavy lifting, and the face is not nearly as expressive because it doesn't have to be. You just get quick glimpses of Jack Sparrow on Pirates of the Caribbean, while Walt gives a 3-minute uninterrupted monologue. So yes, recreating humans is hard, especially if it's a real person. But that shouldn't be an excuse just to lower expectations. Doesn't that just mean that this is a bad idea in the first place? I mentioned this at the very beginning of the video. Blaine Gibson was a legendary Imagineer, the go-to artist for sculptures in animatronics. He worked on Lincoln, Pirates, Haunted Mansion, the Hall of Presidents, and the Partners statue that's in front of the castle. And around the time they debuted the Partners statue in 1995, Gibson was asked if they should ever make an animatronic of Walt, and he said, quote, "There are several reasons I would be against doing that. And it isn't just the sacred aspect of it. I know just how crude our medium is, relative to the human figure. You can't program that smile that I have on Walt's statue and have him be able to go into that. You'd have to move from a scowl to a smile, because Walt at times would get a twisted up expression. He had a facial range that was absolutely beyond our capability. Lincoln is believable because we have no personal memories or films of his speeches and mannerisms. Walt was a man whose movements meant something, and his expressions were so lively and enthusiastic. You can't get that with an animatronic figure. Now, I've seen a few people use this quote as proof that they shouldn't have made this Walt animatronic. They say it's too tough of a task, and all the negative reaction is proof that Blaine Gibson was right all along, that it's a bad idea and they shouldn't have even tried in the first place. But that Blaine Gibson quote actually made me feel the opposite. and crystallized to me why everyone is thinking about the Walt animatronic in the wrong way. Now, I've talked a lot so far, but I haven't shared how I personally feel about the Walt animatronic. And honestly, my reaction was like the kombucha girl. At first, I was like, whoa, the face, the voice, I don't know about this. I think the likeness is in this weird in-between space of not being 100% photo accurate, but also not being overly stylized. It's kind of stuck in the middle. So I do hope that they work to iterate the look of the face and the audio like they've done with other animatronics in the past. But after that first sip of the kombucha, I started editing some videos about the Waltimatronic for my channel, which required me to look at the footage of it a lot. I started going, look at his brow furrowing and relaxing, the twinkle in his eye, the subtlety, the fluidity. The animation on this figure is incredible. The more I look at it, the more I noticed and the more impressed I am. Now, that isn't to say that the likeness isn't an issue, or because it was a hard task, it's no big deal. I get why people are bumping up against it not looking or sounding enough like Walt. That was my first gut reaction. And the unfortunate truth of all of this is that the number one way that people will see this animatronic is looking at it for a few seconds on TikTok or Instagram, writing a comment about how it looks like Tom Selleck, and then scrolling away. Most people will just land at their knee-jerk reaction rather than taking the time to appreciate the subtlety, the artistry, and the nuance in the animation. Which is just how we consume things now. The number of people who have seen the Waltimatronic in person so far is in the thousands, whereas millions upon millions of people have already seen it on social media and made their judgment. It doesn't look enough like Walt, so it's a failure. How could the Imagineers do this? Walt would be so disappointed. But to that I ask, what do we want from animatronics? Is it just accuracy? We have better mediums for that, like photography or wax sculpture. I find it a bit limiting to think about animatronics in this way. Like, imagine if Disney announced that Horizons 2 was coming to Epcot. Hey, we can dream. And this was one of the animatronics on the ride. Not of Walt, but a fictional character that takes inspiration from Walt's look. I think everyone would be blown away. It'd be a huge win. But because this is Walt, a real person who existed, there are so many people judging it based only on the photorealism or the accuracy of the likeness, as if that was the only important box to check. And I actually think it would have been easier and safer for the Imagineers to take the Blaine Gibson sculpt of Walt from the partner statue and just make something that looks more like him, but isn't as expressive. Something that's a step up from Jack Sparrow, but not a moonshot. It would have been way cheaper, way less risky, and gotten way less negative press. And I'm so glad they didn't do that. Do you see what I'm getting at here? What the Imagineers did with prioritizing expressiveness and innovation was the type of creative and artistic risk that we're always begging major companies to take with entertainment. This new show isn't to sell more merchandise or ties into a major movie. They didn't change this theater to have Doctor Strange: A Magical Life playing in double feature with great moments with Mr. Stark. We're always asking for more original attractions in the park, so I think it's something to be celebrated that in 2025, Disney made an attraction based on Walt Disney the man that pays tribute to him by pushing forward the medium he helped pioneer at the end of his life. This animatronic depicts Walt in 1963. And in 1963, Walt was in the middle of working on the Abraham Lincoln animatronic.
The final result is so lifelike that you might find it hard to believe.
The Lincoln figure was far from perfect. The Imagineers exaggerated certain features so it read better on stage. They struggled for years to get the figure to work, and even then it still malfunctioned, sometimes smashing his chair, and in one unfortunate incident, leaking red hydraulic fluid, leading people to see if there was also a John Wilkes Booth animatronic in the theater. Too soon? But despite all that, Lincoln was a breakthrough, a huge leap forward that paved the path for the humanoid animatronics that we're all blown away with 60 years later. And I think that the Walt animatronic is similarly innovative. When Blaine Gibson said that they shouldn't ever make an animatronic of Walt, he didn't talk about how they couldn't make it look enough like him. He focused on expressiveness and mannerisms, things that were too crude for animatronics in 1995, and the exact things that Imagineering prioritized in this project and pushed forward. One of the best ways to make sure technology doesn't stay stuck in that too crude stage is to go for the moonshot. This Walt animatronic is a full circle moment, literally. Walt and Lincoln now share the same stage. They installed a turntable on the stage so they can rotate and change the presentation, showing these two animatronics in tandem. Imagineering could have played it safe and made a figure that was more photo accurate, but pushed the bounds less. But instead, Imagineering tried something new and ambitious. In the words of Walt that are quoted in this very show,
We keep moving forward, opening up new doors, doing new things, because we're curious. And curiosity keeps leading us down new paths.
I think Imagineering continued that spirit with this animatronic. In his very good and very thoughtful review, Tom Bricker said, quote, "The first Walt Disney animatronic needed to be perfect, and it isn't." I agree. This is not a perfect animatronic, but I do think that this is a perfect tribute to the man who started this all. But let me know what you think. This has been James from Guide to WDW. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon.